What were the biggest takeaways early on in your career than that first 10 years of building? What would you say are some of the biggest lessons you learned early on?
Yeah, there's so many. Work ethic, is really important.
Yeah.
Having the right attitude, how important positivity is, the fact that negativity can be a cancer.
The trickle effect, the ripple effect is quick.
Yep. Level of care in people, like truly caring, about the people you work with.
Right.
The people that support you, the importance of variable expenses versus fixed expenses, if you're talking business specifically. That was a lesson that we learned early and that he taught me, because the first time business boomed, I remember we were looking at analytics and we had an underwriter who had done 1 loan in a day. And a good underwriter back then did 7, 8, an average underwriter did 6. And even though this person only did 1 loan a day and we should fire them, we couldn't. We needed that person that bad.
Yeah.
So then from there, making a decision, we're never going to be in this situation again. We need overstaff, we need to have scale. And that's one of the best things I've probably learned from him is not running a business based off of what everyone else does. Do it off of what you know is right and you believe in. And a great example of that is we have 1,000 people too many, 2,000 people too many. All of our competitors, rates go up and down, they lay people off. We don't do that.
This episode of Pain Points is brought to you by Ringba. If your business relies on phone calls, you need to be working with them. Their technology will help you get the most money out of your marketing campaigns. Their call exchange, Ringba X, can deliver inbounds on demand to help grow your customer base. Now, I want to be transparent. Ringba and Adam did pay me to deliver that message, but I'm also a customer, and I've watched them help dozens of companies become more successful over the years. So if you sell a product or service over the phone, I guarantee a moment with their team will be worth it. Are you stuck in that $3 to $10 million year-over-year revenue? Roofs in a Box is your all-in-one growth partner for modern construction companies. They combine AI, virtual staffing, and CRM solutions to help streamline operations. Replace your high fixed overhead with cost-effective systems and support. They empower you to run a smarter, leaner business, freeing up capital where it matters most. Mention this ad to save 10% on your next Roofs in a Box purchase.
All right, man, welcome to another episode of Pain Points, where real pain equals real growth. Today we have a privilege of talking to Bryan Miller with UWM, the largest lender in America.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's been in the space for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And we're gonna just pick your brain and just kind of let it flow, man.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So one of the things I love to talk about is the pain points of growth and scale, things that people don't talk about, things to recognize. A lot of small to mid-sized business owners just don't understand marketing, speed to lead. They don't understand things to look for with financing, cash flow, testing, all those different things. So I'm gonna kind of just let this flow, man. What do you feel like is the biggest, some of the biggest pearls that you can start off with, and we can just kind of
100%. And it's interesting because I have a unique perspective on this because, I worked at, I started in Rocket over 20 years ago, and I've been at UWM for 19 years. Started there, we had 20 people, now we have 10,000 people. We're the largest lender in the country. But in my role specifically, I work with all the largest mortgage companies in the country, independent mortgage companies. So I've seen it firsthand, scaling a company from 20 people to 10,000, but then every day in small to mid-sized businesses, and taking people that started with 5 employees and now they're at 2,000, and one of my partners just sold for over $100 million this week.
Right.
And I was having dinner with him last week, and I go, you remember 7 years ago we sat in a conference room and there were 5 of you and you told me you wanted to grow your business.
Wow.
Did you think you'd get to this point? So I think the number one most common mistake that people make, in general, whether it be a sole entrepreneur or a small business, is understanding the value of time. And there's a saying, and it's not my saying, but I perfected it and made it a little bit better. There's $500 an hour work, there's $50 an hour work, and then I added that there's $15 an hour work, which is so true. If you want to make $1 million a year, you got to make $489 an hour, right? So I think a lot of people are afraid to bet on themselves, to take things off their plate, to give up control in certain aspects. And I challenge everyone, every entrepreneur, everyone who's running a business, sales organization, what are the things you do in a day? And are those worth $500? And if they're not, you need to hire someone else to do it. I've seen it firsthand with our CEO, Matt. He's very successful. He's a billionaire. He owns the Suns. When we started our company, he didn't have an assistant for the first few years.
Right.
And I used to kind of get on him about it. Now he has a whole team of assistants
that
help scale his time. He runs his day in 15-minute meetings. So I think that's an easy starting place for people when you're looking at, how do I scale? Well, first you scale time, and then once you've done it for yourself, look at your team. All right, what's my most valuable thing of my company? Most people, it's sales. That's the engine. So in mortgage specifically, when I work with our partners, how do you make it where your originators, the ones that are doing the sales, are only selling all day long? What type of support can you put around them? Is it like, client support specialists? Is it loan officer assistants? How can you scale their time so they're transacting with consumers that make decisions, selling deals all day long? So that's a very common one that I see.
And what's cool about that philosophy, it's actually universal across all
All
industries.
businesses.
Yeah.
Yep.
I always say there's three funnels to every single business. There's finance, there's supply, which is ops, and there's demand, which is sales.
Yes.
Right. You can't have your salespeople like stuck in the operations side, because now it's keeping them from doing what they do best.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And I've seen a lot of people make that mistake.
Yeah. Time and time again.
Time and time again.
So this is a good point, because I also think there's the beginning part of a grind, right? Like when people are trying to make that $489 an hour, you don't start there. Initially, you have to wear a lot of hats. At what phase of a company do you feel like you need to make that first hire, that first like ops person to kind of help with the supply, the assistance, the back end, the minutia stuff, the $15 an hour stuff? At what point do you think
I look at
hire?
that as betting on yourself, so I would say day one.
Yeah.
If I started a business today, I would not start it alone. I would hire someone to help with the tedious things maybe that I'm not great at. Number one, that's not in my skill set, and it's okay to not be good at everything. I think a lot of people have a hard time admitting that there are things that they're not good at.
Right.
Like, I am not the most organized or structured person. Even though my intent is high on follow-up, I have so many people coming at me that I can forget things at times. So I need people around me that can help support me in doing those things.
Right.
So I don't think there is an early enough time. I think people just need to bet on themselves early. And in our business, in mortgage, real estate, there's a reason why all the most successful people work in the same type of almost team format.
Yeah.
Where the producer's in the middle, and then they usually have 4 support roles around them.
Yeah.
You look at like the number 1 originator in the country. This guy has 32 support people working the same 4 roles. He's making over $17 million a year as an originator after he pays his team. And, it's not rocket science. He just uses his time to the highest and best use case possible.
Right. And it's kind of weird, like when you look at, and I'm sure you've witnessed this time and time again, people that take that advice, like day one, you watch them 7 years later exit for, exponential amount of money. And other people 7 years later probably still pounding their head against the wall, wondering how do I get out of this 1 to 5 million mix?
Yes.
Of maybe $100 an hour, but they just don't know. They just can't scale.
They can't do it. Yeah, they don't understand it, or they're afraid. Fear. It can be a good thing. It's a good motivator. It's always what's motivated me, but it can be a bad thing when it prevents you from betting on yourself.
The other thing that's interesting about that too is that if you start scaling and you don't have the processes and the people in place, it's too hard to backpedal at a certain point, right? Because now all of a sudden you got the hustle, you got the flow, and you can't step back because you can't stop the engine.
You can't.
And then what happens then, it's almost impossible to train someone, because you're trying to train somebody. I always say it's like going down the hill at 50 miles an hour trying to change a tire on the bus.
Yes.
Right. It's at that point it's already too late. Right.
And that's why role specialization is really important, because that's really what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
One, for us in our company and the companies that help implement this, it's great because you're not having to necessarily take your time and train people. You train them to a very specific role, they learn it, then they learn a new role, and it allows you to bring people in maybe that otherwise are not at a high enough skill level to join your company if you were doing everything at once.
Right.
Where they can come in, they can learn a role, be familiar with the company, the processes, then learn a new role. So we've got people in our company that are, top executives, that started off as waiters, but they came in at an entry level role, worked hard, learned it, learned a new role, then they became in leadership. So, setting up that almost assembly line or role specialization, both in operations and sales, allows you to more organically grow your business without maybe necessarily needing a huge training infrastructure. Right. I do think it's important to invest in sales training. A lot of people make that mistake. Yeah. They'll train people for the first 90 days and then they don't do anything. I've always had the aspect that everybody has something to teach me. Like that's how I approach life. That the janitor can teach me something. Somebody that started in the business yesterday can teach me something. Right. So whether it be about life or business.
Cool. So I interviewed somebody, I can't even speak right. I interviewed somebody, my first podcast, and he brought up something very interesting, and I'm kind of finding this universal. People like you that are highly successful, and this kind of work ethic didn't happen later in life, right? It's usually either people come from trying times, people were in sports, usually something around the age of like 13, 14. Where did you kind of pick up this kind of like hustler, kind of make anything to make it happen kind of philosophy, and where did those habits start getting formed?
Yeah, it's funny that you word it that way, because I come from very humble beginnings. I was raised by a single mom, on welfare. But my wife, we've been together since I was 15, and she's like, and even, some of my friends from back then are like, we always knew you'd be successful, because as a teenager, I had that mentality of like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it happen.
Right.
I want to go on spring break, but I don't have money. I'm going to find a way to get money, and for me, I had that mentality as a teenager, and I think what was nice is when my mom married my stepdad, we kind of became lower middle class, but he had friends who were successful. So, we would go visit one of his friends, that was a commercial airline pilot down in the Carolinas, and I was maybe 12, 13, and I saw the way this guy lived. He lived on a lake, he had a boat and a jet ski, and I'm like, that's what I want when I grow up. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And it's funny, I'm looking forward now. I live on a lake, a private lake, I have a boat, I have jet skis, so I think being able to see that was really, really good for me, but I didn't put it all together until I had kids, and luckily for me, when it happened, I didn't maybe think it was the best thing, because I was 22 when I had my first kid.
Right.
But that was gave me a new level of motivation. When you're responsible for another human being, what that does to a lot of people, me specifically, it made it where success was the only option. Failure was not an option. I was going to do anything I could. So, there is no shortcut. There's no fast forward button. I mean, I worked weekends, I worked nights, I, hand dialed hundreds of people a day where my fingers hurt,
right.
And that's what it takes to be, successful. So.
It's funny you say that, because people start talking about work-life balance. I think work-life balance comes to the rear view of experience when your money starts working for you. But
yes.
when in the middle of the hustle, there is no work-life balance, right? You have to put in the hours, you have to put in the time, you have to put in the repetition. Has to be muscle memory.
100%.
Yeah.
The work I did in my 20s allows me to have more balance now that I'm 40.
Yeah.
But I certainly didn't have it then.
Right.
And I think that, not giving up on things is really important too.
Right.
Because there was a point I almost gave up, before I, had my daughter. I'll never forget, my wife went into preterm labor at 23 weeks. She was just past the point where they saved the baby, by 4 days. And we got home from the hospital, and I remember being up all night because I just had enough money to get us to the holidays, but then I was going to have to borrow money from people.
Right.
And I'd never done that. Even though I was 22, I was always the person that people borrowed money from. So, I kind of made a deal with myself, rather than quitting then and going back to what I did before where I made more money, all right, I'm going to do everything I can to where I know I'm not the problem. I'm not going to do fantasy football this year. I'm not going to talk at the water cooler. I'm going to have my head down, grind as hard as I can. And if in the end of the year I haven't made this work, I'll leave.
So that was a jumping off point. That was a pivotal kind of paradigm shift.
Yep, and then fast forward 90 days, my production doubled, tripled, and I had the worst territory in our company. I had East Tennessee, and we used to have a rule.
It's pretty ghetto.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't a lot of mortgages being done, and you had to close, it was 30 loans a month in your first 12 months to keep your job. And the gentleman who had the entire state of Tennessee got fired because he couldn't get enough business out of the entire state to keep his job, but somehow I was expected with the worst half that had no major city.
In a subprime area.
Yeah, to do that. And I did. I did through finding people that wanted to grow their business, learning how to grow a mortgage company, and investing my time in them. But fast forward and marriage, anything in life, I think people often quit on things too early. And if you can stick it out for the tough parts, the best things are beyond the tough points.
So let me ask you something. This is a little bit ADHD in the moment, but you have this hustle, you have this grind, you come from humble beginnings.
Yep.
Is there ever this thirst or this hunger that stops you from being motivated, or do you is there an end game? I mean, or is it just kind of this continuous kind of strive to reach this unobtainable goal?
Yeah, it is. That's what it is. Because for me, I think a lot of people that come from humble beginnings are very motivated by fear. So even though I've got everything and I've had a lot of success, it could all go away quickly, and that fear keeps me from, relaxing. And I care a lot. I care too much. You know, I'm a very caring person. I care about our business, our company, what happens, people, which is a really good quality, but it can be a bad quality because, you know, you worry at times. So I can't see that. Even my wife says, like, you're not going to retire. Like, maybe you'll do something else someday, but
like
you're
consulting
never gonna,
or something.
Yeah, you're never going to like retire.
Same.
So
Yeah. I always wonder because I see like some of my friends who come from wealth, and you know they have much more lackadaisical approach, and they're willing to spend. The risk reward is much higher.
Yep.
You know, and then people that are self-made, a lot of times it just that hunger and that fear. Even though it doesn't matter how many zeros you have in the bank, it's always this hustle of like I need more, or I need to.
And it doesn't go away. Even we're here for a conference. We're in Vegas right now. When I met you, the people I were here with, they left 4 hours before me that day. Right. I stood and I walked the entire floor. I spoke to every single person, even though I didn't need to.
Right.
But I'm like, maybe I'll find something good. I'll meet somebody good. And you know, that was a couple years ago, and we built a relationship.
Yes,
from that. Had I just been like everyone else and gone home and gone to the pool or go gamble, I would have never met you. But you were the last person I talked to that day, actually.
What's kind of irony is that I was talking to some people the other day, and I interviewed one of the guy who actually sponsors this show, and he's actually at the booth, right? And company's worth X, I don't know how many billions or whatever, but he mans the booth. He's with this team, you know, and doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of these shows, and I'm guilty of it actually. I hate to say this. It's not because I'm not thirsty. I'm doing LobbyCon. I'm talking to clients. I'm out there negotiating, shaking hands, patting babies' heads. But I love that kind of hunger. That even though you're worth how many zeros at the end of the name, I'm still humble enough to say, hey, I'm going to sit here and represent it with my team. I'm going to grind it out. I'm going to do what I have to do to make this show successful, whatever that means to the individual.
100%. Yeah.
Right.
Yep, that's like part of the culture. Then his team sees that, and he's instilled that in them. You know, that's kind of been our, you know, culture at our company. You know, we come from humble beginnings as a company, but even once we became successful, we would be at the shows. You know, we used to pride ourselves on the fact that we take a red eye home on Sunday night and go to the office Monday morning and work. You know, and all leadership was at the booth. Where look at our competitors, no one's there.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So I always say that no one gets anywhere by themselves. I know people can be successful just by pure hustle. Who are your best mentors or teachers in life? And can you kind of give me some pearls of wisdom that maybe each one kind of cookie crumbed across the way that you kind of hold on to today?
There's been a lot, but like some of the important ones that come to mind, you know, the first one is my wife. I think it's very important you be smart about the partner you choose. And the fact that my wife has always believed in me.
Right.
She allows me to lead our family. You know, she doesn't second guess my decisions. She always encourages me, which is like so reassuring. And I know if it all went away, she would not leave. Yeah. You know, so number one, that's like we're the starting point. You know, you've got to pick the right spouse.
Well, it has to, especially for what we do.
Yes.
The leaving abruptly, having to do
I'm on the road for
business.
2 weeks, and to be understanding about that.
Yeah, and not worry and not stress and trust and know that you're doing the right thing.
Yes, right? Exactly.
And also for us, we need to make sure that our home life, right?
Yep.
Because it's like if we come home to a stressful situation, we have too much going on that we need to know the home base is taken care of.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's like the number one most important thing, picking the right spouse.
Right.
Which I'm very lucky that I have.
Yeah.
And then from there in like business, Matt Ishbia, obviously, I was very fortunate. So I got our worst territory, became our top producer,
right.
And then he started personally mentoring me. So for like about a decade, I would come in on Friday mornings and we would meet and he'd teach me about the business and we'd come up with new ideas for the company. So I really got to understand the way he thinks, looks at things, operates, and to my knowledge, I'm the only person who's ever done that with. So, you know, I look at him like a big brother. You know, we have a very close relationship, and I'm very appreciative of all the time he's invested in me as an individual.
So what were the biggest like takeaways like early on in your career, than that first 10 years of building? What would you say are some of the biggest lessons you learned early on?
Yeah, there's so many. Work ethic, you know, is really important.
Yeah.
Having the right attitude, how important positivity is, the fact that negativity can be a cancer.
The trickle effect, the ripple effect is quick.
Yeah. Level of care in people, like truly caring, you know, about the people you work with,
right.
The people that support you. You know, then the importance of like variable expenses versus fixed expenses, if you're talking business specifically. You know, that was a lesson that we learned early and that he taught me, because the first time business boomed, I remember we were looking at analytics, and we had an underwriter who had done 1 loan in a day. And a good underwriter back then did 7, 8, an average underwriter did 6. And even though this person only did 1 loan a day and we should fire them, we couldn't. We needed that person that bad.
Yeah.
So then from there, making the decision, we're never going to be in this situation again. We need to overstaff. We need to have scale. And that's like one of the best things I've probably learned from him is like not running a business based off of what everyone else does. Do it off of what you know is right and you believe in. And a great example of that is, we have 1,000 people too many, 2,000 people too many. All of our competitors, rates go up and down, they lay people off. Right. We don't do that. We don't lay people off, and we are in a cyclical business. So even though rates go up, eventually they're going to come down. And because we maintain that staff, even if it's for 3 years and we lose $1 million a month on excess cost, we can make that back in a quarter when rates drop. Yeah. And then all of our competitors are sitting there trying to train people, staff up. It takes them 9 months to staff up. They missed the heart of the refi boom, and our company made $1 billion.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that because it's we run into this in the home services as well with the amount of you have to be ready for scale.
Yep.
Right. Otherwise, you implode.
Yes.
And the problem is if you don't have the back end and the infrastructure, like you're saying, it's the loyalty, it's the repetition, it's the muscle memory. Trying to train people in the middle of a boom is almost impossible.
Yep.
Yeah. You have to have the back end and support for that scalability.
Yes, and a lot of big companies make that mistake, and that's what they do. And I'm shocked that they haven't learned. But most people they run the business off of like dollars. Don't chase money.
Yeah.
Like chase doing the right thing, doing it right. Success and the money will follow.
Yeah.
And I love what you said earlier about like sales operations and then like the numbers. I'm a data nerd.
Same.
I love analytics. I learned the importance of analytics. Whether it be like KPIs, sales performance, understanding your measurables as a sales organization. I've got a great example. Like when I sit down with my partners, I try to explain to them, you need to understand like your cost to fund, like a transaction end to end, your cost per sales, cost per acquisition, cost for operations.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it hurt people firsthand where, one of our biggest partners ever was in a situation where rates had gone up in 2022. He was spending millions of dollars in marketing and he was losing money. And he calls me and he goes, I'm going to cut my marketing spend. I can't afford it anymore. And I looked at his books, I go, they're doing the wrong thing. What you need to do is spend more money on marketing, move your operations to variable-based expenses.
Yeah.
Your operations expenses are what's killing you. Didn't listen, cut his marketing expense. 6 months later, I'm gonna have to lay people off, I'm gonna go out of business. And had he just listened and cut operations or moved everybody to commission, and then put that extra money in sales, because his cost per acquisition was not the problem.
Yeah.
It was the cost per fund.
Yeah.
So, knowing those metrics is really, really important, but not making every decision based off of them.
Like what we do is we do quarterly goals, and this way I'm not reacting in the moment. We have the KPIs for the quarter, we have budgets for the quarter, and whether or not we hit targets or not, that's a quarterly budget. And this allows shift and change. That's not just bipolar type of reactionary stuff because that makes the company itself unstable.
Yes.
Right. When people are just kind of making these impulse decisions in the moment.
Yep.
Even like with us recently, I had this one product that wasn't that had enough complaints about it that I just stopped.
Yep.
Right. And the quarterly thing was let's reassess before we bring it back to market. Right. And sometimes it's okay to say, hey, let's stop this or let's do whatever, but it can't be just in the moment on a dime kind of impulse decision that's going to shake everything.
100%. And it's okay to admit failure.
Yeah.
Like
own it and move on.
Yeah,
right?
we have a saying, don't let good get in the way of great. So we do things quickly, we innovate quickly, we roll things out. Maybe when they're not at 100%, they're at 80%, but then we get them to 100%.
Yeah.
And if they don't work, we admit it and we move on, but you got to be willing to try.
Yeah. Fail quick, scale quick.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And then there's going to be failures in everything we do, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I think this is the other thing, and I don't know if you guys teach this or not, and I've tried to teach this in my own businesses, right? Like I don't use my business as a personal checking account. Mm-hmm. We come up to 3 months prudent reserve to cover all operational, sales, any of my fixed costs, fixed variables, marketing, whatever. So even if I'd made no money for 3 months, my decision making isn't impulsively. I only pay myself out on the excess over the 3 month reserve.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Yeah, so
betting on yourself, doubling down. I watched it firsthand. I know there are years I made more money than Matt, and he owned the company because I was the top salesperson.
Right.
And he was doubling down, and he was betting. Certainly don't now. His distributions are hundreds of millions of dollars,
Right.
you know, but you got to double down. You got to bet on the business. You know, you're betting on yourself in the long term. So I think a lot of people miss that, you know.
So that was your first mentor, the first 10 years.
Yeah.
Do you have another one that?
Yeah,
the
Mark
next...
Hammond, who ran Flagstar Bank's another mentor of mine. I sit on the board of his charity.
Okay.
I've taught a lot. He's taught me a lot about like knowing the right people, how important
Proximity.
Yeah, that is to success. I think work ethic's a big part of it, but man, you save a lot of time by knowing the right people.
Yeah.
So he's been a great mentor.
I call that proximity. Like the phrase I love the most is Bill Gates because his parents were on the board.
Yes.
It wasn't because he wasn't bright. He was probably going to be successful, but proximity to the right sphere of influences, you know.
Yes, it makes
huge.
such a difference,
Yeah.
you know, in building a company or just, you know, knowing the right things to invest in, having the right opportunities. So, you know, he's been another big one. And then more recently he's been Desmond. He's, you know, my direct leader at UWM, one of my leaders, and he came over, he was like the number 2 at Fannie Mae. But I've learned a lot from him more recently on like, you know, approach to life almost, you know, like some of the negatives of overcaring, you know, and how to like, you know, not be stressed out all the time. Because I typically am. So I used to be. You know, I'm trying to enjoy life more and not take everything to heart.
Isn't it crazy how much we consider normal? Most people would probably jump off a building somewhere because our stress levels, like what we maintain, is insane.
Yep.
The amount of high octane, high level of performance that you have to achieve.
100%. Yeah, both like business, you know, family. Because I really pride myself on being a great father. You know, going to my kids' games, helping coach, you know, that type of stuff too. My schedule is insane. I'm nonstop.
Yeah, yeah. So now we talked about like who mentored you. How do you give back? Is it backyard? Obviously, first of all, it has to come at home, right? Your own backyard, you got to look at.
Yeah.
But what do you do now to like mentor and give back? You said you're on boards for like different charities.
Yeah, I'm on a board of charity with Mark Hammond. I sit on the board of a couple businesses. Like there's a company, these great young kids that I've helped mentor and be on the board and advise their company that they're having a lot of success. But you know, even my kids, their friends, people at work, you know. I walked away from being our top producer and a residual-based income because I really wanted to like, part of it was, you know, I took like 1,000% pay cut when I originally transitioned my role 13 years ago. It was insane. 99.9% of people wouldn't have done that, but you know, I wanted to change, I wanted a bigger challenge, and I wanted to help people. You know, I figured I could have a bigger impact and help more people. So
I love that. I always say great leaders produce great leaders.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's a different weight to carry, but I think it's rewarding, right?
100%.
Like servient kind of attitude.
Yeah, and I think like the attitude and having the right qualities, like the 2 most important qualities I think of a great leader are competency and care.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be competent, you have to know what you're doing, you have to understand your business, but then you have to care as well. And I look at life and people through that lens. I know a lot of people that are maybe really caring, but they're not the most competent, you know, or they're very competent, but they just don't care. Right. You know, so if you can, you know, find individuals with those 2 qualities and help, you know, teach them and guide them, you know, it's like a tree, and the branches go out and they do the same for others.
Great. Well, we're about ready to wrap up, but I wanted to do some shameless plugs. If people are trying to find you or want to reach out to you or want to pick your brain or use you for your services, how do they find
can email me. It's just bmiller@uwm.com.
Yep.
You know, email me. I'm happy to help anyone. So
beautiful. Well, once again, real pain equals real growth. Bryan Miller, thank you for your time, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely.
Appreciate it.
This episode of Pain Points is brought to you by Ringba. If your business relies on phone calls, you need to be working with them. Their technology will help you get the most money out of your marketing campaigns. Their call exchange, Ringba X, can deliver inbounds on demand to help grow your customer base. Now, I want to be transparent. Ringba and Adam did pay me to deliver that message, but I'm also a customer, and I've watched them help dozens of companies become more successful over the years. So if you sell a product or service over the phone, I guarantee a moment with their team will be worth it. Are you stuck in that $3 to $10 million year-over-year revenue? Roofs in a Box is your all-in-one growth partner for modern construction companies. They combine AI, virtual staffing, and CRM solutions to help streamline operations. Replace your high fixed overhead with cost-effective systems and support. They empower you to run a smarter, leaner business. freeing up capital where it matters most. Mention this ad to save 10% on your next Roofs in a Box purchase.